This is episode number 18 of the Silvertrac Extra.
Thanks for tuning in to the Silvertrac Extra, your source for the best tips, tricks, and how-tos to dominate the security industry. Helping you improve your business, win more contracts, and crush your competition. Here are your hosts, Chris Anderson and Johnny Page.
Hello, Silvertrac Nation, and welcome to episode number 18. I'm your co-host, Johnny Page, and today we're going to be talking about how to use incident reporting software in the construction site security industry, and we are going to be going over a number of different areas where you and your officers and your entire operation can really deliver value by using these amazing tools. You won't want to miss the content provided here today, especially if you're currently serving a construction site. So before we get into that, let's hear from a quick word from our amazing sponsors over at Paperless Proposal. Then we'll jump right into the featured conversation.
Developed for mid to large security companies, Paperless Proposal is the #1 enterprise-level cloud-based proposal creation and management solution. Use it to create, send, track, and manage highly customized proactive or RFP proposals. Differentiate your company and win more business with this powerful proposal generation software that can include office files, video, templates, pricing tools, CRM integration, and e-signature approval. Contact us for a free demo at www.paperlessproposal.com/Silvertrac.
What's up, everyone? We are here on episode number 18 of the Silvertrac Extra, and today we're going to be talking about using incident reporting software for construction site security. And Chris, the construction industry in general generates a lot of revenue for a lot of security operators out there, and there are some unique aspects of these properties that we should be addressing, especially when it comes to developing reports.
Yeah, absolutely, John. It's more than just sticking a mobile home or a little trailer on the lot anymore and putting a camera up. They're expecting a lot more from the security company now.
Yeah, so Chris, what is the old school approach, or the approach that if you're using this right now, you should probably pay special attention to this episode? How are companies normally going about security for a construction site?
Well, the old school approach was an old ghetto dog, right, in a trailer, as I mentioned before, and doing perimeter walks and just basically looking for any fence lines that were cut where people would come in and maybe steal copper, because that was a big thing. And it's still a big thing today. But what the companies are looking for today, or I think construction sites are looking, because they have a lot of different demands with OSHA. It's safety demands and other things. So we have to look at other ways to be a partner. And one of them is providing a service or maybe a reporting tool that allows us to report issues that have to do with maybe liability and safety, but equipment checks as well.
Yeah, and you said something in the preparation for this episode that I thought was really good, and you brought up the fact that it's about more than just visibility now, right? Where before we could just be visible, be a visual deterrent on the property. You hear that all the time, but at a construction site now, there's a little bit more demand placed on the security company if you want to be competitive, because there's so much more requirement on the actual contractors there as well.
That's right. And the site itself, or the construction site, is a project where a lot of people are coming in day by day, whether it's a vendor or whether it's people doing construction on the actual site, and they need to monitor it. So you have a construction site supervisor that sits in that trailer is trying to manage all that activity. So anything that you can do to better or provide better reporting to him is the key, and that's traffic in and traffic out.
Okay, so that's the first key here. If in our DARs, we can be recording traffic in and traffic out, especially if this is a 24-hour account. And Chris, why is that so important?
Well, our problem when we were doing security down in San Diego was a large construction company that were constantly building. And their problem was vendors coming in not only during the weekday, maybe before shift or after hours to complete the work, or picking up equipment that maybe they forgot. There was a lot of theft involved. The other one was the weekend activity. Again, guys missing during the week, surfing or whatever at the beach, and then trying to come in on the weekends to catch up in some of the work caused a lot of issues because they found out things were getting stolen, right? So they wanted to track who was coming in. So what we did is we used our parking module to track vehicles, record license plates, and create IDs. So any vendor that did actually show up to the site, whether it was before, after, or weekend, we were able to record.
Yeah, and so part of this is going to be identifying like the standard operating procedures with the customer. So when are vendors allowed on site? When should they not be? When should the builder or contractor be notified of a vendor on site? Because the coming and going, a lot of times it can look official, and then the next thing you know, someone who looked like they were supposed to be on the site could potentially be, a threat to the assets on the property and just the operation in general.
Yeah, and people are getting creative, right? You get a construction site and throw a bunch of equipment in it and drive right in. Typical guard will wave them and let him in. So, again, sitting down with a construction site supervisor, asking what the demands are, what their expectations are, and what they really want you to do, and realistically, what are the problems at the site. So that's what we did. So the idea was to control traffic in and out if needed. And when it came to OSHA inspections or equipment inspections, what did they want us to do, right? And I'll tell you, some of them went as far, John, as far as the OSHA is hard hat inspections or ID. So if anybody was not walking around that construction site without our hard hat or ID, we actually physically walked up to them and we actually recorded that on the handheld, and that was sent to the construction site supervisor immediately. Right? So any safety infractions, whether somebody was using the skip loader or driving it too fast or even as far as the scaffolds on the side of the buildings that looked out of place, anything that was a potential hazard, he wanted to know about.
And so you're leading in the main reason why we provide special attention to who's coming and who's going to the access control is because there is a lot of high dollar equipment and assets on this property, which is the second thing we need to be paying attention to, is that a lot of times that these workers can get a little bit careless with the storage of this material or just with the safety of the property in general. So we want to make sure that, especially when everyone's off site, that we're paying special attention to some of those high dollar assets.
Right. And I'll just give you an example today. So for our listeners that are out there that think they're pretty familiar with the construction site, I want you to think right now, what do you think is maybe some of the issues that the construction site would want you to report? You've seen it on the data activity report. In fact, you've even reported it on the data activity report. So let me throw some new ones out. How about, number one, checking the master key box? Is it secure? The key box that is supposed to have a lock that controls whether it's the shipping containers or the skip loaders, all right? How about ID badges that we talked about? How about the construction exits, making sure that the locks and the chains are secure at each entry and each exit? On the actual exits themselves, which exit should be open, which one should be closed, okay? How about, again, hard hat, construction materials? I think we maybe mentioned ID badges as far as lighting and trailers, backhoes, checking cranes and rigging material, right? And then how about also people coming to the site, vendors and OSHA? Those guys would love to know when OSHA's on the property, right? So,
yeah, absolutely. And another thing that is important is that we're not just, it's one thing to check these, but what we're saying is that it's important to include it in the reports, because that's when it becomes a reduction in the risk and liability, right? You could say all day long that you were inspecting for visitors coming and going or for, hard hats being worn, but until it's actually documented in a reliable format, like using Silvertrac, it doesn't really actually do us any good. You might as well not be doing that. So it's really, really critical that it's included in there, even down to the minor details. Like no matter how many times you check to make sure that all the hard hats are done, when you consciously go through that and you survey the property to make sure that that's in effect, make the note in the DAR and do it as frequently as possible.
Yeah, and we'll even go as far as, again, it's meeting with a construction supervisor, because here's one fine example. I was told, he said, Chris, do us a favor, when you're walking around and you see these guys putting up the scaffolds on the side of the building, and you may be familiar with them, John, right? It's when they're going to be doing some of the pasting on the wall or actually putting, it's the scaffold next to the side of the building.
Yeah. A
lot of these guys would take their lunch boxes up there, or take their tools, or maybe using a hammer or a heavy drill with a cord that's sitting up there and then walk away from it. Right? And there's somebody below walking by and or actually trip on that cord and pull that thing down and hit somebody in the head, right? So anytime that we were actually walking and we saw anything that could be anything that we could prevent or report, that was huge for them because we could actually now pull reports, send those to the construction site supervisor, and that was stuff that was showed to OSHA when they came there. It was kind of a prevention tool, all the way from fire and theft. All the way
absolutely.
Them,
Yeah, and one of the things that we have to realize is that these builders and contractors are under enormous amounts of pressure to be hitting deadlines. They're managing so many different items. So if we can ask them just in a daily or a weekly 10-minute check-in, hey, what is the biggest issue you're facing right now? What are some things that I should be aware of this week that are different because of last week? Because this site is constantly changing, which is a huge difference between a lot of the other sites that we work in the security industry, and that the risk at this property is going to evolve every single day as these projects progress.
Yeah, and we were able to help them with the lost and found items, right? There was guys that had left tools and equipments. Maybe there's some things that we found in confined spaces, right? How about some copper, things that were put away in the back on the fence line that were hidden where somebody could easily pop over and pick up after shift, right? So again, it was really being able to do great property walks, being able to identify and report everything that we were doing from them, from checking equipment lockers, checking containers, making sure that the permits that were required or IDs were being worn, hard hats, checking the skip loaders, the construction exit zones, you name it. I mean, think about it. That goes way beyond just arriving and departing the construction site anymore.
Oh, for sure. I mean, this is one of the easier industries to really add value to the customer. And the benefit of doing this, if you go the extra mile as either an officer and as a company, then you become the key contact for the next project that's going up. And for some of these areas, that can be really, it doesn't have to be temporary work of a year or a 2-year project. This could be an ongoing basis because you've really delivered value to your customer.
Yeah, and I reported this last time in one of our previous podcasts. We had a thing with the generator cables being left out, and I think I told you they're pretty pricey. A lengthy one is anywhere between $6,000 and $9,000, at least at that time. And we were trying to track the date and the time when these guys were leaving it out because they didn't want them left out over the weekend because it's full of copper, right? People could steal it. So we were able to actually report, and I'll make it short for today, but we actually put a date and time that we actually photographed the cables before we left, and then they got stolen after the time we left, and then we were challenged, and we were able to show that to the construction site, kept our contract.
Yeah, and so if you want to listen to that episode or visit this episode, visit silvertracsoftware.com/extra, where we cover amazing topics and resources just like this one to really help equip today's security operators for tomorrow's success. So in addition to that, visit this episode. We got silvertracsoftware.com/18 for episode number 18. Also, show our sponsors some love over at Paperless Proposal. Again, amazing content over there for all of you business development managers who are looking to shore up more contracts. And until next time, my name's Johnny Page.
And I'm Chris Anderson.
This was a Silvertrac Extra, and we'll talk to you soon.
This has been another episode of the Silvertrac Extra. For more insider information, visit silvertracsoftware.com/extra. Listen on the go by subscribing in iTunes. Want to hear your questions answered on the show? Visit silvertracsoftware.com/questions to submit your requests.